So let's go ahead and meet today's panelists. We have with us from What Counts, Emily Key, Director of Strategic Services, and our very own Bob Kolner, Director of Analytics here at BoomTrade. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Bob.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So, like Lauren said, we're going to be talking about how to better re-engage our users. And what we're looking at, well, this retention cliff, this is the challenge. We all know how hard it is to keep customers coming back day after day. We work so hard to acquire new users only to see up to 80% of them never return after their first visit. So it's actually, this retention curve that we're looking at is actually very typical for many e-commerce and digital media businesses. So today, we want to talk about how we can address this challenge. Email is going to be the primary medium that we use today in this webinar to address engagement. And really, email is unique because when a user signs up to receive your email, they're giving you an invitation to have a direct conversation, and it's up to us as marketers to make the most of that invitation. And it means providing value to them and communicating to them in a relevant way. Now, I think, in 2015, most of us have the basics of our email marketing set up. We are acquiring new email subscribers, and we're sending them content regularly. So today we want to spend some time talking about other topics and best practices really to take your email marketing to the next level, looking for ways we can drive increased engagement from our email activities. So the first topic we talk about is the A/B test. It's an incredibly powerful and flexible tool that can scientifically help us make our emails better. The beauty of this tool is it's completely flexible to test anything we can imagine regarding our emails. This includes, of course, the subject lines as well as the time of day we send, anything to do with the design, be it the images or the call to actions as well as the editorial content. It's all viable to test. So anything that we can vary, we can test against our current email and see if it outperforms. So really it's a very iterative process that can help take us a long way into driving more engaging email. So I thought since we've got a lot of marketers on the webinar today, it'd be fun to just ask, how many of us are currently using A/B testing to improve our email campaigns?
And while everyone's kind of writing in, I can kind of speak to that. We don't all use it consistently. We know the power of it. We know how good hard facts and hard data really translate to our strategies, but we all kind of neglect it. It's a complex, detail-oriented process, so it's not as consistent as we'd like it to be.
That's right, and it looks like a lot of the responses are, it looks like the majority of folks have used it, though it's not something that really people are applying to every email that they send, and that's kind of what I expected. So maybe to take just a brief moment reviewing some of the methodology that goes into a good A/B test. Now, for a lot of us, this is review, or perhaps we even have a tool that helps us run these. I kind of wanted to call out one thing in particular today, which is just number 3, which is just the fact if we are going to set up A/B tests and start creating different variants of our emails, we need to make sure we're randomly assigning our list to each of these variants in the control. There's a lot that goes into an A/B test. We're not going to cover all of the nitty-gritty of the methodology. I just wanted to highlight that because I have seen people tend to skip over that step in the past, which is just a big no-no. So I think Emily has some more to say regarding how you can use A/B testing in your email.
Yep, I sure do. I think that one of the great places to start when it comes to A/B testing is to start with subject lines. Most ESPs make it really, really easy to test subject lines when sending out an email campaign, and if you're not testing anything else, you should really start there, especially if you're trying to connect with at-risk or unengaged subscribers. Research has actually shown that by keeping the subject line to 50 characters or less, that you can reduce the chances of having the subject line cut off. especially on mobile devices. And keep in mind, you can always use your pre-header text to further communicate your message. As in most email clients, it will kind of truncate behind the subject line in someone's inbox. I would also highly recommend that when testing subject lines, whether those subject lines be command-driven words that have been shown to increase open rates by 6%, or you're using exclusively exclusivity within the language of the subject line, which is shown to increase open rates by about 22%, or even personalization that has shown some nice increases as well, that you really start to think about testing types of subject lines against each other. That way you can kind of bucket them into, command-driven versus personalized versus short versus long, to glean some real insight into what works the best for you and apply that moving forward. So keep in mind too that, small changes can really make a big impact when testing. So don't ever think that an idea is too small to test. Some of the really big ideas may actually turn out to not really impact your results at all. You never really know what's going to happen. That's why testing is so important, and it should be fairly simple to do, like I said, with your email service provider. So check out this example. The only real difference between version A and version B of this email campaign is the background color and the size of the product being shown. And, surprisingly enough, version A here on the left-hand side with the white background and the full product image actually saw an increase of 325% when it came to unique clicks. Just subtle changes like that can really make a big difference. And here on the next slide, you can see that, again, very small changes can actually really make an impact. Version A of this test, which only had the addition of the word now on the call to action button, actually proved to see a 12% increase in paid signups. So again, very small changes, but big impact on reaching the overall goal there. So when you start to think about testing, there are some common mistakes that you'll want to keep top of mind so that you don't make them. Think about your kind of overall goal. Don't just work on optimizing for conversions, revenue, the end-all be-all. If your goal is really to kind of win back unengaged subscribers, open rate may be your #1 priority that you're working on increasing. So keep in mind that you want to set your goals up front. Keeping it too simple sometimes can kind of be a mistake. However, we just saw that no idea is too small to test, and that's the power of testing overall. You also want to make sure you have a decent sample size so that your test in the end is statistically valid. And also, like I said, make sure that you look at metrics across the board. Don't just kind of hone in on conversion being the main metric to determine whether the test is a winner. And also make sure that you are keeping in mind how your message, your test, will render on different devices too. So how do you know when to stop testing or whether or not you need to kind of move forward and continue testing? One way you can tell is when you stop seeing improvements. That's kind of the main common theme. Eventually, your kind of improvements, your increases in opens or clicks or conversions will kind of plateau. And that's normal. You've kind of discovered the best globally optimized kind of subject line or call to action, whatever element of the email you may be testing. And that means that it really appeals to the highest average of users across this average situation that you're testing. So kind of to get beyond that plateau, you really need to stop thinking about your audience as kind of one generic profile. And at least for the first step, start to segment users based on specific goals and kind of optimize for those different segments.
We're back. Thanks, Emily. That brings us to our second topic we want to cover today, which is segmentation. So really, A/B testing a single email can take us so far, like Emily was describing. Eventually, we reach a plateau where we've basically found the best way to communicate to the average user, but we've kind of ignored the fact that not all of our audience is alike. So I like to use the example from my past experience as a marketer in the mobile gaming arena. You know, I had two primary types of users. I had my hardcore gamers, which are very experienced and knowledgeable, and I had my noobs, who were just getting started playing games. And really, it was a challenge trying to communicate to both of those groups as if they were one persona. Eventually, I was able to break through and start driving meaningful improvements once I started segmenting them out and addressing them individually. So, you know, my noob gamers, they really appreciated extra tutorials and hand-holding and explanation, whereas my hardcore gamers, they really just wanted to get right into the heart of the game and start experiencing the core gameplay. So once I was able to make that segmentation, I was able to see real meaningful improvements. Today, I want to introduce what we call an engagement segmentation. So I think this is really related to our theme of the webinar, re-engagement. So this is a great way to start segmenting your list in terms of your users that are at risk versus your healthy, active users. So what I mean by that is active users being the folks that are currently engaging with your brand. Now, currently, that definition might vary by your business. For some businesses, that might mean they've been active in the last week. For other businesses, an active user might be anyone who's engaged with you in the last quarter. It really depends. But it contrasts with an at-risk user. Now, this is someone who has a history with your brand. In the past, they were a valuable user, but you've not seen them in some time. It's not been so long that they're completely gone, but I like to think of it as they have one foot out the door. Really, to drill down on this and make it more actionable, I'd like to introduce what we call the 4x4 rule. This is really just a way to kind of take the idea of this engagement segmentation, these at-risk and healthy users, and actually operationalize that definition so we could actually create and segment this list. So what we recommend here, and anyone that's tracking any kind of basic user data should have all the raw materials to pull this off. What you just need to do is go in and find all the users that have visited you at least 4 times in the last 4 months, but have not returned in the last 4 weeks. And honestly, the number 4 there is not actually very important, and actually I would recommend you play with that to find numbers that best fit your business. But the idea is we've identified folks who were valuable in the past, but we have not seen them in the recent history. We've got an opportunity to re-engage them before they're gone for good. So now we end up with 2 buckets of users. So we've got our active users, and we're going to continue sending the existing email that we've been working with A/B testing to improve to these folks. And we're going to spend most of our attention trying to address the at-risk users and trying to actually custom tailor our messaging to their situation. So now we have the opportunity to basically make a case for the value of our brand and remind them why they signed up in the first place and what they're missing out on. So I think it's a good practice to highlight all the best content that you've created recently. This is stuff that they haven't seen because they weren't around. So remind them of what they're missing out on. It's a great reason for them to come back to your site. Maybe if you're in the e-commerce space, there's some other levers at your disposal. You could consider offering special offers or discount codes. This can be very effective, and it's also more financially efficient because you're not offering this to everyone. We've actually kind of surgically targeted these at-risk users, and we're offering them these special discounts because of their unique situation. Like Emily has some more to say about how you could address these at-risk users.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So as you were mentioning, there are several different types of win-back content that you may want to test out with your particular audience to see what resonates better. Listed here are a few different examples of that content that is typically used in re-engagement type campaigns. You'll probably see update subscriptions or update preference campaigns be used as kind of a win-back method. I've also seen feedback surveys used, trying to glean some information and insight into why someone is becoming unengaged or at risk to begin with. Not only can that kind of help get people back in the kind of funnel and engaged with you again, but it can also kind of give you as a marketer insight into what maybe you need to change in your overall program to kind of reduce the number of people who may be becoming at risk or unengaged. Incentives, value-based testimonials really seem to kind of do really well at winning people back, especially if your customers aren't used to receiving discounts or coupons or offers on a regular basis. And again, like Bob mentioned, keep in mind, you're not sending that to everyone. The typical kind of response rate from at-risk or unengaged users tends to be around, I'd say 2 to 5%. So think about that when sending to a kind of pretty large list of unengaged subscribers. And in all of these messages, you're going to want to create a sense of urgency. Get people to get excited about whatever it is that you're offering or whatever value it is that you're providing. Most kind of win-back campaigns or series of campaigns kind of complete out with re-permission emails or make-up or break-up campaigns, as they're also referred to, and result in some type of list cleaning. But a couple of other factors that you'll want to keep in mind when it comes to just re-engagement best practices overall are the subject lines and the calls to action, and we'll go into those a little bit more in detail here on the next slide. So when it comes to kind of the subject lines, keep in mind that these at-risk users are people who are not visiting your site and aren't kind of connecting with you possibly via the email channel. Therefore, they've kind of been marked as at-risk. So according to return path data, those re-permission or make-up or break-up campaigns really only have about a 1.8% open rate. So that's kind of on the lower side, and hence it's one of the last campaigns that you're sending to this group. So it's kind of that last-ditch effort to kind of win them back. We've also seen that using win-back language like miss you or come back within these subject lines of these re-engagement campaigns has shown to see about a 13% open rate. So that's quite a bit higher than kind of that average we just talked about, around the 2 to 5% range. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about what subject lines you want to use. Also, studies have shown that using a $1 off discount versus a percentage off discount was actually twice as successful in getting people to open the email. So just a few kind of tidbits of facts that may help when creating those subject lines. Once you kind of get over that first hurdle of getting an at-risk user to open an email campaign, you definitely want to work on driving them back to the site. And I will say that it's an easier kind of metric to accomplish than getting the open rate. So you have a much better chance of driving someone to the site who was unengaged and actually took the time to open your message. So when it comes to those calls to action, just make sure that they're clear, they're concise, they really stand out. Use size to your advantage, use position to your advantage on the email or within the email design, use white space to your advantage, contrasting colors, and really just make sure you're setting clear expectations with the call to action language too. So kind of going back to the content here for a minute, you'll want to make sure that you're not kind of just giving it a one shot and then you're done. It's going to take a little bit of time to kind of re-engage these at-risk subscribers. So test a variety of different content and calls to actions to really try to re-engage them. Don't just think that you're going to be able to send one campaign and then feel comfortable kind of cleaning your list. Use additional data that you have. You may have preference data. You may have past purchase history. You may have site browsing behavior data. Use that to make the message and the subject line more relevant to the audience that's receiving it. It's only going to help increase your chances of kind of getting these people back into the fold. And track your open rates and your click rates and your conversion rates, and use that data to kind of weed out re-engagement campaigns that you feel like are not up to par. Because the goal is to automate. We want to definitely automate a series of win-back campaigns so that as soon as someone kind of falls into that bucket of being unengaged, you can automatically have the best of the best re-engagement campaigns ready to go and automated to win these folks back. So here are just a few examples. And one thing to keep in mind across the board when it comes to creating your re-engagement or your win-back campaigns is that you want to design them in a short, concise kind of postcard format. You're speaking to unengaged subscribers who won't spend much time, if any, really looking for the value. So as we talked about, use large clickable buttons to make it clear that you're really asking them to take some action. So you can see on the left-hand side, it's a discount. This is a discount being offered, and there's really a lot of real estate given to the unsubscribe link, which I think is interesting because most of us as email marketers tend to shy away from wanting to call attention to our unsubscribe link. But it's nice to do sometimes within re-engagement campaigns because you want to have a high quality, clean, healthy list. And if someone doesn't want to receive your emails anymore, make it easy for them to remove themselves from the list. So this is one time that I would kind of think about calling more attention to the unsubscribe. The LL Bean example here in the middle is a pretty typical kind of managed preferences campaign. We talked about a little bit earlier that that's a pretty common approach used to win subscribers back. And then on the far right-hand side, this is a pretty typical example of that makeup or breakup or re-permission type campaign. What I want to point out here is notice that there's two calls to action in this makeup or breakup campaign, and I think that's really important. Research has shown that by providing someone kind of with both this yes, I want to remain on the list option and this no, remove me from the list option, that you'll actually see a higher response rate on yes, keep me on the list. So something to think about when you're designing that re-permission or makeup or breakup campaign. So to summarize really quickly, these three steps really provide a proven methodology for keeping users kind of coming back and engaged in your brand and your website and your products. First and foremost, identify who your at-risk subscribers are. And then build that compelling re-engagement email and content and do a lot of testing and figure out what works the best for your audience. And then automate it, continue through segmentation, and really work towards getting the best results. We here at What Counts actually offer a prepackaged solution to help our clients set up and execute re-engagement. Sometimes, even though segmentation doesn't cut it, just simply segmenting and trying to send a relevant message in that way. And it sometimes costs too much time in the process, too many resources are used to do that. So when that happens, the next step that Bob's going to talk about is really automating one-on-one personalization and machine intelligence into your email marketing.
That's right. So our third topic is machine learning. But it's not really machine learning that we're talking about. It's about achieving that one-to-one communication with your entire user base. That's actually what's really interesting for us. So machine learning is the technology that enables us to have that relevant communication with each individual user. So where have we been? We started out communicating with our entire user base as if they were one person. That was effective, especially after we applied A/B testing to improve it. Eventually, we needed to start segmenting the list to two or more segments to achieve more relevant communications that drive more engagement. The problem with this is eventually we're going to be trying to manage 10 or more individual segments, and the logistics become very tricky. It's a lot of data to manage. It's a lot of editorial content to be producing. It becomes a bottleneck. That is where technology comes in. Machine learning is the only way to manage the complexity with processing so much data. And really, marketing's always been about sending the right message to the right person at the right time. It's being relevant. In the context of a modern digital business where you've got tens or hundreds or even millions of subscribers, we really need to lean on machines to help us track each user to understand every individual's interests And then we also need to leverage machines to ingest and comprehend all the content you've produced. So with these two things in hand, we can actually start to make nuanced recommendations to each user based on their interest. So to dive into that a little bit more, what goes into a machine learning algorithm to drive relevant communications? So this is based on what we do at BoomTrain. So BoomTrain, we offer personalization as a service, and there's a variety of factors that go into this. So like I was mentioning, we would actually want to go in and look at all the content you've produced and semantically analyze that to understand the concepts embedded in your content. Likewise, we'd also want to pull all the metadata that your editors have used to help also understand, each user, what they're interested in based on that metadata. We're going to combine that with some other techniques like collaborative filtering is something you may have heard of because Amazon has famously used it to great effect in their e-commerce business. So if you buy a cell phone at Amazon and you realize that they are recommending you to buy a cell phone case, well, that's collaborative filtering. It doesn't actually know at a very deep level anything about cell phones or cases. What it does know is that in the past, people who have bought cell phones have also tended to buy cases in that same purchase. So hence it's going to make that recommendation. So we're going to combine all that stuff and then layer on business rules. It's another important factor to being relevant. So you might be a news outlet. So in this case, being relevant means we only want to surface the recent content that you published in the last maybe 24 or 48 hours. So all of these factors combined with rich user profiles go into generating relevant recommendations. And really, the takeaway from this is if we're able to do this by understanding each user's interests and then serving them content that's relevant to that, we're going to see increased engagement. This could be driven by the subject lines that are personalized to each user as well as the content within the email that's based on their interests. The other key factor when you're going to leverage machine learning is you're going to have user profiles that you can take with you across channels. So anywhere your users can engage with your brand, ideally you'd have the ability to communicate with them in that one-to-one way, be it through email or on your site or even in your mobile app. So that's a key factor if you're going to leverage an automated technology to deliver your communications. And what's the impact of doing this? Well, it varies for every business. So typically what we've seen is that versus the static editorial content, we see higher engagement through click-through rates. So this is an example of one of our clients, Chow. And what we're looking at is their email newsletter. And if you notice, there's actually 3 examples of the same newsletter with very different content within. That's because these newsletters had 3 unique recipients. Well, that first person was into comfort food. Presumably they had browsed lots of comfort food on the site, so we're actually recommending this lasagna recipe to them. Now, recipient number 3 on the right, apparently they're a bit of a booze hound, but we are going to actually make a relevant recommendation to them in terms of a new cocktail recipe. And then, like I said, the end result of serving up these relevant content is that there's higher engagement that goes along with it.
So I want to kind of restate one statement that we made early on in the presentation as we start to wrap up here, and that is that email is the #1 tool that marketers have at their disposal to win back at-risk or unengaged subscribers. To make sure you're taking advantage of this tool and the tactics that we've talked about today. When it comes to A/B testing, it's a very basic, fundamental kind of strategy that should definitely be a part of your email program and is ongoing. It can be very manual, but your ESP should definitely make it easy for you to do, and it's a necessity. When it comes to engagement segmentation, it may take more time and resources, but it really helps address those at-risk users fast and identify who they are so that you in turn can kind of target to them. And with machine intelligence, as Bob just talked about, automate kind of all of the above, and kind of lets you scale with this one-on-one personalization, and create really powerful content that's going to be super relevant to your subscribers. So we here at What Counts, we partner with our clients. We're an email service provider, and we partner with our clients to really drive more revenue by leveraging not only the savvy people that we have here in our full service agency, but this sophisticated email marketing platform that we've kind of built. When it comes to re-engaging your subscribers, we can, work with you as much as or as little as you want to help you kind of execute the best strategy for your audience. All you really have to do is just ask.
Great, and along with that, Emily, as you said, email is really the best tool to do this, and What Counts. If you think of What Counts, you guys are great at powering the where and the when and the how, and you can kind of think of Boom Train as the what. We're the intelligence layer that predicts the optimal content for those emails, and those emails, they're one-to-one, they're individualized to each individual user, and that's what really drives deeper engagement, greater retention, and increased lifetime value, which for us marketers is really the end goal. Again, together we are a really powerful solution to deliver that dynamic, engaging email campaigns. And the best part about it is it's automated, so it saves you time and helps you reach those end goals. And I think that brings us to our conclusion. Thanks, everyone. I think we're ready to take some questions. You can enter them at Twitter at #KeepThemEngaged or right here in the question box in the webinar. We've got one here. We'll go ahead and start. Bob, I think this is for you. What are the best ways to measure retention? Just because people are opening emails doesn't mean they're truly engaged. Great question. Bob, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, I think there are a couple different ways to do it. I do have my favorite. You might have heard the term of cohort analysis, and really I think this is the best way to measure retention, because we're actually going to start with isolating a cohort of new users. So maybe these are all the new folks that visited your site for the first time on a given day or given week, and then we're going to track that cohort of users forward through time and basically track the number of users that return to the site the next day, the day after. You can imagine that you'll end up with a curve where you could see on the first day where that entire cohort first visited, 100% of them were active. On that next day, you're going to see that only a proportion of those users were still engaged. So that would be your day one retention rate. The proportion of users that are still active the next day over the total number of new users that first arrived the day before. And you can imagine that's how you would get a day one retention. If you wanted a day 7 retention, you could get that as well. So that's my preferred way to look at it.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Looks like we have another question, and this one Emily, I think you can take this one. How do you A/B test within an ESP platform, and what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so within a platform, each platform is going to be different as far as the way that it's set up and how the testing functionality within the platform goes about, but they're pretty common. Most of them actually allow you to test more than 2 variables at one time, and most of them will allow you to kind of optimize on the fly, as I like to say, where you can test 2 different variables against each other and maybe only send it to, say, 20% of your list, and then allow the ESP to actually determine who the winner is after a certain period of time, so that the majority of your list is getting, say, the best of 2 subject lines or the best of 2 different email designs based on the metric you choose to be the winner. So you kind of have different options when it comes to testing with ESPs, kind of testing and optimizing at the time of send, or kind of just doing some strict kind of variable testing and then looking at the results later. And there are pros and cons for both, and depending upon kind of which type of test and what the results or the outcome that you're looking to achieve and the sample size all of that can definitely impact the method that I would typically recommend to choose there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that automation along with that is really powerful. So in line with that, we have another question. Can you give an example of a personalized subject line? Sounds like a great question for you, Bob.
Sure. I think this is an interesting one because I've seen what's works has changed a bit over the last few years. I think a few years ago, you could typically see a good boost by including the user's name in the subject line. Today, I've seen that decay a bit, but one thing that still is effective is including their home city. So especially if you've got content that's related to a local events, and if you could tailor that in that city in the subject line, that's a great way to grab people's attention. Let them know that it is relevant to them because it's based on their location.
Awesome. Really good insight. And I don't see any other questions. So I think with that, we kind of went a bit over as we started late, so I think we can go ahead and call it a day. Thank you everyone so much for coming, and we hope you had a great time and gained some valuable insight. And again, we will send the webinar out within 1 to 2 days. Thank you.